Hey guys, this is KingDX with first23.com, and today I'm going to be talking about the Bladedancer subclass inside of Destiny. Now, as you all may know, if you played Destiny in year one, it was a very popular opinion that the Bladedancer subclass was considered the best subclass in the game, at least for PvP. PvE, Bladedancer was always a bit behind all of the other options, mainly because one, hunters are naturally squishy, and two, their super really lack the ability to clear out lots of ads. So what I want to do with this video is I kind of want to talk about Bladedancers, how they used to be, how they currently are, and also go over some of the intentional nerfs and some of the unintentional nerfs that Bungie has made to the subclass over the last year. Now, I'm not 100% sure if Bungie is aware of some of these changes they made and how they affected the subclass, but I just want to point them out. Now, this isn't a video where we sit around and we try to argue why Bladedancers need to come back to being the top. I don't think they need to be anywhere near the top. I'm actually going to also argue that they never were truly at the top. But I do think that there should be balance among all the subclasses. As we've already seen, Titans have had a complete revamp. All three of their subclasses were played around with, which I think was a great thing to do. And hopefully, I'm just really hoping that Hunters will be next. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So as some of you may know, Bladedancers had some serious flaws in year one. The problem with these flaws, some of them were overlooked because at the time, Blink Shotgun was really overpowered. There were a lot of outcries from the community saying that the Arc Blade Super was just way too good, way too powerful, allowed the user to get 5-6 kills per activation. That wasn't completely true. But a lot of times when you have a lot of people yelling, it's really hard for common sense to kind of take place there. So, as we know, because of that, some things happened to the Bladedancer subclass. Now, just to set the record straight, I personally don't think Arc Blade was ever overpowered. Now, originally I started the game playing as a gunslinger, and I moved over to Bladedancer the moment I had it unlocked. Now, people just simply weren't willing to use their supers to trade for the supers inside of PvP. One thing I noticed is that originally at the beginning of year one, there were very few Titans inside of Crucible. Now, yes, you're going to argue, I was a Titan, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I get it. And well, in all honesty, there just weren't a lot of Titans. Personally, the best super to counter a Bladedancer was a Fist of Havoc. But people didn't like the trade-off. They didn't like, doing a 1-for-1. They wanted to make sure every super they popped got them 3 kills and netted them 4 kills. And because of this somewhat greed or desire, to do more with their super, they were unwilling to commit to killing the Bladedancer. And because of that, a lot of people suffered deaths at hands of the Arc Blade Super. Now, Bladedancer has always been countered by Fist of Havoc and Nova Bomb. These were both 2 supers in the game originally. And it just was one of those things where the community didn't understand how the supers work. They weren't adept to audio cues, and a lot of times people didn't work together. There was a very horrible lack of communications. As you know, you couldn't even do a fire team, not fire team, but the other channel, the public channel that you can do inside of Crucible. You didn't have that option at the time, so there wasn't a lot of communication. So basically, if a Bladedancer came out and you weren't aware of what the audio cue was and you didn't know what team it was, it could surprise you very quickly and overwhelm your team, especially if you had a team that wasn't coordinated and willing to team shoot the Bladedancer. Once people kind of figured that out, once shotguns became a lot more prevalent, then the cries from the community to kind of bring and tone Bladedancer down kind of diminished. But because there was that perception for so long, a lot of people are still really adamant that Bladedancers were at some supreme pinnacle at some point in Destiny. People almost equate the Arc Blade Super to being just as strong as Suros used to be back in the day, and honestly, that's just not true. Now, one thing that struck me as odd when I looked at the Bladedancer subclass is that some of the perks didn't seem like they should have been perks of a subclass. Specifically, I'm talking about Fleet-Footed and Quick Draw. Now, for some reason, these perks, they just don't feel like they should be woven into that class. And if you look at it, those perks are essentially perks that can be found on guns. For example, fleet foot can be found to a lesser extent in knee pads, which gives you the ability to slide further. And then also any gun that gives you additional sprint or agility bonuses, kind of like the meta multi-tool. Now, while a year 1 Dragon's Breath could possibly give you a pseudo solar grenade in some instances, I would still argue that it didn't make solar grenade irrelevant. Having quick draw on your gun and quick draw on your actual subclass makes one of them null and void completely. So the truth of the matter is you have to look at it and say, is quick draw really a perk that's supposed to be on guns, or should it be on the subclass? And if so, one of them should be removed, because it seems a little unfair to the person playing that character that essentially one of their perks can be handled by every single class in the game. That just seems really odd. You don't see every class in the game being able to rise from the dead, or throw suppressor grenades. So it's just really weird that you would see those abilities being transformed, or I guess essentially being transitioned over to guns. It just always struck me as being just a little odd. Now, let's take a look at some of the direct and indirect nerfs that have been applied to the class since the game launched. Some of them have been PvP nerfs, some of them have been PvE nerfs. But we'll go ahead and we'll just start off with some of the direct nerfs that Bungie has made. Now, at some point in time during the original launch of Destiny, Bladedancers, their Arc Blade Super, created far more orbs than they currently make today. Now, I looked through all the patch notes and tried to find exactly the date in which they nerfed it, but I couldn't find it. Now, because I don't have the documentation for it and I don't want to completely sound like a know-it-all, I am going to have to simply just say, if you haven't been playing the class since day one, you'll have to take my word for it. They used to make a ton more orbs inside of PvE and PvP. They got reduced at some point. The only thing I can assume is it was a ninja nerf, but I definitely remember when it happened, and I remember being upset about it. I thought it was dumb then. And I still kind of think it's dumb now that they don't have the abilities to make as many orbs as Stormcallers. But hey, that's just one of the things that they did, and I kind of wanted to throw it out there. They also nerfed Blink. Now, let's get this right. Blink deserved to be nerfed. All the changes they made to Blink were absolutely deserved. I don't see anything wrong with it. Blink shotgun was OP as shit. However, because hunters are known for their agility, they're supposed to be the fastest class, they're supposed to have the highest mobility. Nerf like this really affects hunters more than warlocks, who have higher recovery. And especially when you have titans with the ability to skate, which they truly have the quicker mobility, then you kind of hurt the hunters even more. That subclass takes even a bigger hit, because now not only are we not as mobile as a titan that knows what they're doing and they know how to skate, you've also kind of nerfed our blinking capability. So that was kind of a big change that happened. I'm not saying it wasn't needed, not saying I know the appropriate way of how that should have been handled, but it was a nerf that really hurt the hunters more so than a warlock. Flux grenades. Flux grenades were changed to have their tracking reduced, which seemed a little odd to me, because if you've ever played a Defender Titan or a Sun-slinging Warlock, you'll know that the magnetic grenades and the fusion grenades, in my opinion, stick far more consistently, with fusion grenades being a little dumb sometimes, honestly. Sometimes I don't even see those things come out. Also, Arc Blades. Arc Blades had a reduction in damage, also the amount of range that they were able to hit enemies. Now, this was one of the nerfs I just couldn't clearly understand why they did it. Now, to be fair, when they nerfed Arc Bolt, they also nerfed Firebolt, but Firebolt with Viking Funeral and some other different perks, I mean, wow, it could do some serious damage. Arc Bolt, on the other hand, it was more so as a finishing tool, right? You throw it into a crowd, it hits one or two guys, you come out and you kind of clean it off, if you're doing it offensively. Defensively, you maybe take a shot, maybe you get hurt, you duck behind cover, throw your Arc Bolt grenade, and it finishes the enemy off. Now, so that's incredibly hard, incredibly difficult, and it really didn't make any sense that they nerfed it by as much as they did. I would love to see Arc Bolt go back to the same amount of damage as it had before. I personally think this was one of the worst nerfs they made to Bladedancers personally. Now, here are a list of unintentional nerfs. Blink currently, for some reason, takes a hunter out of their invisibility, which seems a little odd because invisibility is one of the most known signature traits of the Bladedancer subclass. So it seems odd that our best mobility option would get rid of one of our signature perks. Another thing that nerfed us unintentionally, patience and time. And yes, I know that sounds incredibly fucking dumb. And if I were you, hey, who knows? I might pause and just go to another video. Seems a little weird, but the reason I'm going to say patience and time is because, as I just discussed, invisibility is a signature trait to the hunter. So it seems really weird that we start seeing guns that have hunter abilities essentially rolled inside of them. Yes, patience and time gave every user invisibility for a short amount of time. Now, it was far to a lesser extent. You had to stay down scope, but you know, it was one of the things that made Bladedancers kind of stand out in PvE. And it seemed really odd that they would just throw that on the weapon so carelessly. I mean, I thought the weapon was a cool gun. I love that gun, but it kind of felt like a slap in the face somewhat as a Bladedancer primarily. Now, year 2 exotics are also unintentional nerfs. Now, what do I mean by that? By the end of year 1, there were only 2 viable Bladedancer PvP exotics. That would be Capristines, which are the exotic arms that give invisibility, kind of like Stalker, and they also do increase melee damage as well. And then we also have Lucky Raspberry, which allowed you to respawn with your arc bolt grenade. Also made your arc bolt grenade chain further, which was a great, just really great, solid exotic for things like Trials of Osiris. Now, currently, neither of these have been brought over to year 2, and there are no other exotics currently for the Bladedancer that fill their roles. So while Mask of the Third and Don't Touch Me's are great for PvE, there just doesn't seem to be anything compelling in the competitive space. Also, swords. Now, once again, this seems like an oddity, but swords basically mimic having an arc blade active. And if you think of it like this, right? So they allow you to dodge in the air. They can block incoming damage. Obviously, arc blade has somewhat of an overshield, and they do not limit you to only using close range combat. So one of the biggest problems when you're using arc blade is that you have to get up close to enemies, right? And if you're getting in close on a group of enemies and they're prepared, you know, they have their invectives out, their chaperones, you get in too close, you're going to sleep incredibly quick. Sometimes it would be great if you could, you know, essentially kind of put your blade away and pull your gun back out and then go back into, you know, your short range combat. Because you don't have that option, it actually limits how deadly you can be, opposed to a sword in which not only can you block the incoming damage, but at any point in time, if you decide that close range engagement is no longer worth it, you can simply put your sword away and you can go into other options. So that's just something that they have over the Arc Blade Super. Also, they have longer range, which is really weird. They actually have better striking range than the Arc Blade Super. So they can actually beat an Arc Blade if you know what you're doing. Stormcaller, Sunbreaker, and Night Stalker were also nerfs to the Bladedancer subclass. Simply put, we were given 2 better roaming supers with armor, and Night Stalker is a better alternative in every single way. It just flat out beats it. Night Stalker is just as fast as Bladedancer. It generates more orbs, has a far stronger neutral game, and the ability to shut down supers. Night Stalker also has far better versions of Stalker, as it can benefit the whole team from using its smoke bomb grenade to grant invisibility. It also is a ranged invisibility grenade. So essentially, you can have all your team somewhere on the other side of the map and throw your smoke bomb over there and give them all invisibility, which can last just as long as if you were to use the Stalker ability and Shadow Jack from the Bladedancer subclass, which means personally Night Stalker is just better, because what's better than having one person invisible for PvE? Having your whole team invisible. So it's just a better perk, better subclass. So if Night Stalker is better in PvE, then how does Bladedancer do in PvP? Well, let's go over some of the matchups. So Arc Blade loses to Fist of Havoc, Hammer of Soul, Nova Bomb, Storm Trance, Shadow Shot, Golden Gun, and that is 6 of the 9 possible subclasses. It ties with another Arc Blade, and while Razor's Edge used to be able to penetrate a defender's bubble, now the matchup between Ward of Dawn and Arc Blade is pretty even depending on the Titan setup. If you disagree, I suggest going to play a couple matches of Mayhem. Hell, do 10 matches of Mayhem. And if you saw more than 4 Bladedancers, I would truly be shocked. Now, I don't think that Bungie is intentionally trying to hurt the subclass, but when they nerf things, then they give other subclasses better options, it makes the remaining strengths of the class less appealing. Now, in order to fix this, I would suggest Bungie looks into some of the failing talents and think about replacing some perks completely or making their abilities much better. Showstopper and Razor's Edge need to either be tweaked to take less energy on use, or they should be changed that their roles are better emphasized. Blink should not take you out of invisibility. I would also increase the damage of an arc blade swipe, at least for PvE, and I would also allow the super to generate its full 8 orbs like the rest of the supers. All grenades for Bladedancer should be looked into being adjusted as well, or I would simply put Arc Bolt back to the way it was. I would look at perhaps combining the Stalker and Shadowjack perk, and I would say remove Quick Draw and Fleet Footed altogether. That opens up a way for the class to be given 3 new perks that can better define the role of the class. As of right now, Bladedancer is not bad at both PvE or PvP, but it's also not really good either. It's really hard to figure out what the new perks should be, but it's also not really clear what the role of Bladedancer should be as well. As I stated, this is not one of those Bungie please make Bladedancers better than every other class type of videos. It's nothing like that. All I'm saying is I hope that Bungie at least hears some of these perspectives and listens to them. Doesn't mean I'm 100% right. Doesn't mean I'm necessarily 100% wrong. What it means is that there's obviously some gaps there, and I'm really hoping that the design team over at Bungie will be able to figure out a good way to balance it and bring it back, not to how it quote unquote was, right? We don't want it overpowered. We don't want people crying about it. We don't want anything nowhere near as bad as the original Sunbreaker was. But we do want them to look into it and perhaps address some of the gaps in its actual gameplay. Neutral game wise is worse than Night Stalker. Super wise is worse than Gunslinger. It just doesn't really have a good footing, and I would really love for Bungie to tell us exactly what the role of the Bladedancer is. Not really tell us, but I rather them show us what Bladedancers are supposed to do. Well, that wraps up this video. Once again, I'm KingDX for first3.com, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.